Lately I've been thinking about the question, or asking myself, does Zen have a central spiritual practice? Is there some practice that really sets it apart from other Buddhist meditation traditions or from all other meditation traditions? So that's a question that I want to sort of touch on in this talk. But first of all, I'll take case 86 of the Shoyo Roku, or the Book of Serenity. And its title is Rinzai's Great Enlightenment. Rinzai asked Obaku, "What is the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma?" Obaku hit him. This happened 3 times. Rinzai then took his leave and went to see Daigu. Daigu asked, "Where have you come from?" Rinzai said, "From Obaku." Daigu said, "What did Obaku have to say?" Rinzai said, "I asked him 3 times, what is the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma? And I got his stick 3 times. I don't know if I was in error or not." Daigu said, "Obaku was overly gentle, like an old grandmother. He completely exhausted himself for your sake. Yet you come here and ask if you were in error or not." With these words, Rinzai came to great enlightenment. So the Shoyo Roku, or in English, the Book of Serenity, is a compilation of 100 koans. And originally it was just the koans and a verse commentary attached to each koan by Master Tiantong. And I think he probably lived in the 12th century, the 1100s, I think. And then later on, another master, Master Wonsong, he came along and he expanded on that book, and he added a prose introduction to each koan, and then a long prose commentary on the koan, and then there was Tiantong's verse, and then Wonsong added a commentary on the verse, and then he finished off with a number of remarks or added sayings about the koan and the verse. And so I've just taken the case and just to say who the main characters are. There are 3 characters. There's Obaku, who is the successor of Pai Chang, I think, and he's the teacher of Rinzai. So we've got a little lineage there, but a very important lineage, because Rinzai, coming after Obaku, then becomes the founder of one of the 2 major Zen schools that have come down to the present time. So Rinzai is the founder of the Rinzai school, and the other great school, of course, is the Soto. And here at Bodhi Zendo, we draw on both those traditions, the Rinzai and the Soto. So Rinzai's question, what is the true essential great meaning of the Buddha's teaching? Obaku's answer, he hit him. He did this 3 times, after which Rinzai was very puzzled. And hitting him doesn't seem to be a very clear response to, saying what the great meaning of the Buddha's teaching is. So Rinzai decides to leave, and he goes to see Daigu. And of course, Daigu asks him where he's come from, which seems to be what happens in all these encounter dialogues, as they're often called. A monk comes, the master says where you come from, and then that leads into a question and answer exchange. And so when Rinzai tells him where he's come from and what Obaku said, Daigu says, Obaku was so kind, he was so grandmotherly, etc., etc. And at these words, Rinzai was greatly enlightened. Perhaps many of us are not so enlightened by that. Then Wansong provides quite a long prose commentary, but I want to go to the story from which the koan and Wansong's commentary, or the story that they draw on. And you find this in the Record of Pilgrimages, which is part of the Rinzai records. So it's a little bit long, but I think it's worth reading. When Rinzai was one of the assembly of monks under Obaku, he was plain and direct in his behaviour. The head monk praised him, saying, though he's a youngster, he's different from the other monks. So the thing is that Rinzai has come to Obaku's monastery, and he's come after a period of academic study, it seems. He had studied the sutras, he'd studied the treatises, and they hadn't provided him with the enlightenment that he was seeking. So he comes to study Zen with Obaku. And the head monk notices him, and he's been there for 3 years, but he's a bit puzzled by, he seems to be so full of promise and commitment, but there's something that he doesn't do. So the head monk asks him, Honourable monk, how long have you been here? Rinzai replies, 3 years. And then the head monk says, have you ever asked for instruction? Have you ever been to Doksan, in other words? Have you been to see Obaku and asked him a question or made a presentation? And Rinzai says, no, I've never asked for instruction. So I've never been to Doksan. Why? Because I don't know what to ask. So I think some of us could relate to that. I know that for a long time I didn't know what to ask or what to say in Doksan. So the head monk gives him a question. Why don't you go and ask the head priest of this temple just what the cardinal principle of the Buddha Dharma is? So he gives him a question. So it's not Rinzai's question, but it's the head monk's question. So Rinzai went and asked. Before he had finished speaking, Obaku hit him. Rinzai came back. How did your question go? Asked the head monk. Before I had finished speaking, the master hit me. I don't understand, said Rinzai. Then go and ask him again, said the head monk. So Rinzai went back and asked, and again Obaku hit him. Thus Rinzai asked the same question 3 times and was hit 3 times. Rinzai came back and said to the head monk, it was so kind of you to send me to question the master. Is that irony? 3 times I asked him, and 3 times I was hit by him. I regret that some obstruction caused by my own past karma prevents me from grasping his profound meaning. I'm going away for a while. So he decides to leave. The head monk said, if you are going away, you should go and take your leave of the master. Rinzai bowed low and withdrew. The head monk went to the master's quarters before Rinzai and said, the young man who has been questioning you is a man of Dharma. If he comes to take his leave, please handle him expediently. In the future, with training, he is sure to become a great tree which will provide cool shade for the people of the world. So the head monk's doing a bit of interceding for him here. Rinzai came to take his leave. Obaku said, you mustn't go anywhere else but to Daiyu's place by the river in Gaoan. He's sure to explain things for you. So Rinzai arrived at Daiyu's temple. Daiyu said, where have you come from? I have come from Obaku's place, replied Rinzai. So again we see this pattern, where have you come from, and so forth. So it sets up the exchange. What did Obaku have to say? Asked Daiyu. 3 times I asked him, just what the cardinal principle of the Buddha Dharma is, and 3 times he hit me. I don't know whether I was at fault or not. Oh, Baku is such a grandmother that he utterly exhausted himself with your troubles, said Dayu. And now you come here asking whether you were at fault or not. At these words, Rinzai attained great enlightenment. And that's where our koan ends, but then the story goes on. So he attained great enlightenment. And then he cried out, there isn't so much to a Baku's Buddha Dharma after all. Dayu grabbed hold of him and said, you bedwetting little devil. You just asked whether you were at fault or not, and now you say there isn't so much to a Baku's Buddha Dharma after all. What did you just see? Speak, speak. So he realizes that he's had some great enlightenment. At this, Rinzai jabbed Dayu in the side 3 times. Shoving him away, Dayu said, you have a Baku for a teacher. It's not my business. So he realizes that Rinzai has had some great enlightenment, but he wants to send him back to Obaku because Obaku is his master. And so Dayu belongs to a different lineage. I think he goes back to Masu, whereas Obaku goes to Paichang. So Rinzai left Dayu and returned to Obaku. Obaku saw him coming and said, what a fellow. Coming and going, when will it end? It's all due to your grandmotherly kindness, Rinzai said, and then presented the customary gift and stood waiting. So where have you been? That question again asked Obaku. Recently you deigned to favour me by sending me to see Dayu, said Rinzai. What did Dayu have to say? Asked Obaku. Rinzai then related what had happened. Obaku said, how I'd like to catch that fellow and give him a good dose of the stick. Why say you'd like to? Take it right now, said Rinzai, and immediately gave Obaku a slap. You lunatic, cried Obaku. Coming back here and pulling the tiger's whiskers? Rinzai then gave a shout. Ha! Attendant, get this lunatic out of here and take him to the monk's hall, said Obaku. So that's the context for our koan. And what I want to do is take up not so much the question that Rinzai asked Obaku, what is the great essential meaning of the Buddha's teaching, but I want to take up another question. What is the special spiritual practice of Zen? Now, why I wanted to go back and read that story, which was a bit long, but it brings out something that is perhaps peculiar to the literature of Zen and to its practice, namely that these koans are really encounter dialogues. They are meetings between a master and a monk, a master and a disciple, or sometimes between 2 masters. And there's always this exchange, and usually very often the exchange ends in the disciple attaining enlightenment. And what we notice is missing in all of these is any mention of meditation. So we have a series of interactions. We have, in this case, the head monk interacting with Rinzai, sort of noticing him in the assembly, noticing what he does and what he doesn't do. We have Rinzai interacting with Master Obaku, which doesn't seem to be very satisfactory for him, not very enlightening. And then the head monk who sort of becomes a facilitator here, and he goes and intercedes on Rinzai's behalf. And then Rinzai is sent off to Dayu, who then sends him back. And these dialogues seem to follow a pattern. You know, where have you come from? I've come from so-and-so. What did so-and-so say? He said this. And so it goes on. But again, there's not much mention of meditation. And when meditation does get mentioned in these dialogues, it seems to be cast in a slightly unfavourable light. For instance, there's the story of, I think it's Masu, who, when he started training, was very assiduous in his practice of Zazen. And his master saw this. And so he came along to him one day while Masu's doing Zazen and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm doing Zazen." "Why are you doing Zazen?" He says, "I want to become a Buddha." So the master just goes and sits down nearby and gets a stone and starts rubbing it on a tile. And he rubs, and after a while, of course, Masu, who is trying to concentrate on his meditation, looks over and, "Master, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm polishing this tile. I want to make it a mirror." And Masu says, "Well, you can't make a mirror out of a tile by polishing it." And the master says, "And you can't become a Buddha by doing Zazen." So some people use that as an excuse for not doing Zazen. Anyway, Rinzai's great enlightenment here then seems not to be anyway the result of him spending hours and hours in doing meditation. But of course he has been doing meditation for 3 whole years with the monks. But it's presented as it's not presented as the successful outcome of a private individualistic quest. There's this whole business of the encounter dialogue and the interaction. So here, one scholar who has done a lot of work on the origin and development of Zen during the Tang and Song dynasties in China, he says that in these encounter dialogues we see, as he says, the locus of religious practice. He sees that it was firmly removed from individual effort in the meditation hall and replaced by a demanding genre of interrogation that sought to destabilize all habitual logical patterns. And so the logical pattern that's destabilized here is, what is the great central teaching of the Buddha? And you get hit. It's not the sort of answer you would expect, say, in a university lecture hall. So Zen spiritual training, then in these dialogues, is presented not so much as an individual endeavour, and so it's seen as an interactive event, the interpersonal encounter between master and student. And so the scholar here, John McRae, he sets up a contrast. He contrasts this with what he says is a basically Indian conception of meditation practice. And he says that in the Indian conception of meditation, it's seen as an individual yogic endeavour of self-purification and progressive advancement towards Buddhahood. So it's something that the individual does, and it's I suppose, a lonely quest. Whereas Zen practice implies that the most important aspect of spiritual cultivation takes place in the encounter between teacher and student. But still, Zen trainees spend long hours in the meditation hall, and yet the focus of Chan rhetoric and literature is on the dialogues and exchanges between each master and his student. So Zen practice, says McRae, and I'm tending to agree with him, is essentially relational. So it involves interaction between individuals rather than being based solely on individual effort. I think that when I came to Zen, I thought what I was interested in was Zazen. I didn't really want to know about koans or doksan or walking meditation. I just wanted to sit. I thought if I sat in the lotus posture, well, a variation of, and sat very still and very silent for hours and hours, I'd get enlightened and all my problems would disappear. Doesn't quite work like that. So, at this point we can say Zen practice is relational. As relational, it places the emphasis on the dialogues and exchanges between each master and his students. This view of Zen practice, which I've just been talking about here, is based on John McRae's close study of the origin and development of Zen during the Tang and Song dynasties in China. So this covers that period from about the 6th to the 14th century, roughly. So that's back in medieval China. What about today? Another scholar is writing about something similar, and mainly about what's happened when Zen has been exported from Japan to the West, to Europe, to the Americas, even to Australia and New Zealand. So today, what form does it take? So we saw McRae talking about its relational character of Zen practice. This other writer, Henry Schumann, he says that in its history, Zen has shown a traditional concern with experiencing intimate connection with others. So again, we're relational, intimate connection with others. And so the sole emphasis in the Zen tradition is not on Zazen, not on meditation. And Schumann says, Zen meditation periods are generally shorter than in other Buddhist meditation schools. Even on retreats, the sitting is broken up by frequent walking meditation, by work practice, chanting, and private interviews with the teacher. It's not that there is no emphasis on meditation, but there is a decided emphasis on something else too. On Zen retreat, activity is important, and not merely as a break from meditation. If it were all about meditative cultivation, then the orchestrated bustle of the meditation hall, the frequent and usually brief meetings with one's teacher, the liturgical forms and the collective work periods would be mere distractions rather than integral parts of a training. So you talk about the orchestrated bustle of the meditation hall. I'm thinking of when someone is walking the stick and going around whacking people. It tends to think, well, that's a bit distracting. So, in a sense, Zen practice starts out as a path of individual training. So we start out thinking that we're just doing Zazen. But as we go on, we are sinking deeper and deeper into community and relationality. So at first we may not notice this, or we may resent it, but then we come to value it. And according to this writer, Schumann, this is not widely understood or appreciated in a Western culture that prizes rugged individualism. So in the West, there's this tendency to think of Zen as it's what I do. And it doesn't involve other people. So Schumann writes, in Zen, the relationship with the teacher is a crucial juncture where the capacity to connect gets opened up. So this idea of opening up to others, to our work, to the things we work with, to our tools, to the environment, these are all important aspects of Zen practice. So here we see that Zen challenges our isolated sensibility. And it does this through its emphasis on building up Sangha relations, and especially through its stress on the important role of the teacher. So I'd like to stress that it's really important to go to Doksan, even when you've got nothing to say. People who are working with koans usually will frequently go to Doksan. Sometimes they mightn't go if they can't work it out, but you know, it's important just to go and just have that interaction, even if it's just very brief, even if nothing much is said. That you're building up a relationship with the teacher, and through the teacher with the Sangha. So, I don't want to set this up as some sort of contest between meditation and these other practices. And so, again, I'll quote Skuman here. It's not that practice is either about the liberative experiences found in meditation or about connection. Rather, it's that liberative experience isn't fully actualized until it finds expression in connectedness. And the main connectedness here is with the teacher who affirms and acknowledges your understanding. The title of Skuman's article is very enlightening, I think. He talks about Zen's challenge to an individual interior spirituality. So I want to go back to the koan now. So in the koan, again, we have this. Where am I? We have this interaction. Rinzai and Obaku. What is the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma? Obaku hit him. This happened 3 times. Rinzai then took his leave and went to see Daigu. I think a lot of us would have taken our leave before that. Daigu asked, "Where have you come from?" Rinzai said, "From Obaku." Daigu said, "What did Obaku have to say?" Rinzai said, "I asked him 3 times. What is the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma?" And I got his stick 3 times. I don't know if I was in error or not. Daigu said, "Obaku was overly gentle like an old grandmother. He completely exhausted himself for your sake. Yet you come here and ask if you were in error or not." With these words, Rinzai came to great enlightenment. So we see him coming to enlightenment after a series of exchanges with his teacher, with the head monk, and with this other master, Daigu. And so what I'm wanting to bring out here is just that there is this stress on interaction, interpersonal relationships. And it's also significant that here, it's at these words that Rinzai came to enlightenment, to great enlightenment. So my stress in this talk has been to get you to think about that relational aspect of our Zen practice, and particularly the relationship with the teacher. And then having put all this stress on that sort of Sangha, teacher-student, self and other in the environment and so forth, I leave you with this question. How is it that a Zen practitioner can say, "Above the heavens, below the heavens, I alone am the honoured one"? So take page 13, Bodhisattva Vow.
Bodhisattva Vow.
When I look at the real form of the universe, all is the never-failing manifestation of the mysterious truth of the Bhagavad. In any event, in any moment, in any place, none can be other than the marvelous
revelation of its glorious light. This realization made our founding teachers and virtuous and leaders extend tender care with a heart of worship to animals and birds and indeed to all beings. This realization teaches us that our daily food, drink, clothes, protections of life are the warm flesh and blood, the blissful incarnation of Buddha.